All right, first one of the year. Here we go. Welcome, everybody, to the first High Street Conversations of 2025. Glad you can join us either live or watching this as the recorded version. We've got a lot to speak about, so we're going to be looking at the year ahead. Firstly, though, I have to wish everybody a happy new year. Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed your winter break. In terms of my New Year's resolution, it is to be more positive and to stop being the prophet of doom and to have a more positive outlook on life and the industry. And that is something I absolutely intend to do from next week onwards because right now I want to tell you all just how bad things are and start with this question. Are we on the brink of a financial crisis at both a local and a national level? There's a lot happening out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by taking the big picture stuff, especially in terms of the global economy, and then we're going to work our way down and look at how things could very well impact us at a much more local level in terms of our day-to-day role. We've talked about this before. The UK has heavy debt, years of economic stagnation. We've had to deal with the cost of COVID, cost of living crisis, inflation, aging population. We seem to just face perpetually high debt for this country. As a comparison, Ireland not doing too bad. As a proportion of its national income, its net debt is around 6%, which, as far as most major economies go, Ireland is okay. Take the UK though, and this net debt sits at around 100%. 100%. It is huge. It is a challenge that needs careful monitoring, careful management. It only becomes that challenge only transitions into a problem if there is an inability to be able to service that debt in any meaningful way. It's been clear in the last few weeks that that challenge could now be becoming the problem which a lot of people had feared. Borrowing costs are spiking again. So we've had a challenge for a few years since sort of late 2021, early 2022, where borrowing costs have shot up and haven't really recovered. And just recently, in the past couple of months, they've been steadily going back up again. They are right now, the borrowing costs for government debt is the highest it's been since 2008. So you're looking at middle of the banking crisis. So that's yields on UK government bonds over 10 years. What this means is more and more of the tax revenue we are bringing in, rather than that going out and investing in public services, the public services we need for growth to break this doom loop we are in, that money instead is going on servicing that debt because the costs of borrowing are increasing. It's like your mortgage going up exponentially and it becomes really difficult. The cost of servicing the debt, apparently, according to one source, is approximately £100 billion a year. So this isn't small change. This is a massive amount of money we're losing to servicing this debt. So this comes from the conversation, good publication, university-led publication, which looks at the various issues which might be behind why these borrowing costs are spiking. And it says there's no clear answer, but there could be a number of things at play. Uh, some suggest that it could be down to energy prices and concerns around those because of conflict in the Middle East, which, because of the recent ceasefire announcement, could well be we see that particular issue settle down. It has been noted that the timing was just in the aftermath of Labour's budget late last year. So that budget took place on the 30th of October. So there are question marks around how much the increase in the cost of borrowing is linked to that budget. However, it has also been noted that there was another really big political event that took place at around about the same time. And yes, unfortunately, I will bring it up because I've avoided this topic for a long time. I've switched off the news on this, but Trump is back, is coming back into office. And in terms of the promises for his new administration, there are certain things which have global markets concerned. So Trump has promised tax cuts and tariffs, which has brought with it a real fear of inflation. And those fears appear to be impacting markets globally. This matters because effectively the US impacts global prices and sets global borrowing costs. So what the US does can impact everyone. It's why we have the old adage of when the US sneezes, the world catches a cold. That's the challenge we seem to have. So there seems to be a level of contagion here. And it seems to ring true because those borrowing costs for governments seem to be the same for lots of global economies. Spain, France, Italy, Germany, and yes, even the US itself are all seeing exactly the same things. If you look at the borrowing costs for the UK versus the borrowing costs for the US, they mirror each other almost identically. So there has to be a relationship between the two. Even if it's not that clear that it's the current government's fault, it is still the current government's problem, and they are the ones that have to manage it. And one of the things which now becomes a challenge is that they've already ruled out so many options when it comes to flexing fiscal policy to allow us to get out of this mess. So it leaves them with very little flexibility. Things like really tight fiscal rules, which they don't want to break. Things like ruling out where they might take additional tax revenue from. So, of the few options that are left for the government just to make sure it can balance the books, this is where we start to get concerned at a more local level. We've already seen some big announcements, which means at a local level, we've got some big changes coming, most notably for our local authority members. But these things always then filter down for our to our bid members. So just this week, the Prime Minister has already announced that they are going to be looking at great efficiency within public services, within local government, using AI to create those efficiencies. So the AI Opportunities Action Plan has been launched. I think that took place on Monday. In previous meetings, we've said at ATCM that actually the introduction of AI into things like planning and development might make sense. But it'd be interesting to see where this goes if this is primarily about creating efficiency. Late last year, for England specifically, we had the publication of the English Devolution White Paper, primarily about pushing powers from Whitehall down to local government. But for those of you who have read through the publication, you will have also noted that within it, it talks about a massive reorganisation of local government, changes to boundaries, and possibly fairly big streamlining of the two-tier local government structures to create efficiencies and to save money. So this could be huge potentially for our local authority members. This could be huge. Also, the creation of strategic authorities as well. So we're waiting for more information on how this might play out so we can give you a more comprehensive update on what this would look like. And of course, we already know from the budget, the government is planning to take a lot more money from employers' national insurance coming in from April this year. It's become one of the primary ways the government has looked to raise money because it's expecting to raise quite a bit. And this particularly has had the private sector concerned. The private sector has largely shot back, saying if the mission is growth, then why increase a tax on employment? And so there are concerns there about that particular measure. So the question is there going to be further action coming because of the increases in borrowing costs? And if so, what might they be? Um, Rachel Reeves is looking into it, absolutely no doubt. And I think for us, both in terms of impact on the private sector and the impact with regards to taxes, but also in terms of funding on key programs for town centres, we just wonder if we will have a challenge. Certainly, the timing for us is pretty unfortunate because right now the increase in borrowing costs happens at the same time when the UK government is undertaking phase two of its spending review. Um, and I have heard that some within government have been concerned that in terms of funds specifically for town centres, high streets, regeneration, there are a lot of them and they don't always seem to match up. They go into the teens. We're talking about the things like UK Shared Prosperity Fund and long-term town plan for towns and high street accelerators and future high streets fund and towns deals. There's a lot of them. So there is likely to be some streamlining, but with that streamlining, will there be less money to go around in terms of this funding? This is a big debate we need to have. ATCM intends to respond to the spending review to say that, look, if growth is that important, we are going to need to be able to invest via our local authorities in certain programs. So we are going to be making that case. So we as an industry will need to have that conversation. We need to do a deep dive into the financial challenges for our industry. So it's important for me to say, make sure you get your tickets booked for the Place Management Conference this year, taking place in just over a month's time. The theme is a crisis in local government finance. It's going to take place once again at the Welcome Collection in Euston on the 26th of February. And we're going to be looking at a lot of really big topics. We're going to start with asking, where's the money gone? We're going to be joined in conversation with Heather Jameson, editor of the Municipal Journal. So it will be a Q&A with Heather, looking at those financial challenges which have been hitting local government in particular. We're then going to talk about right, so we know there's been not enough money going into local government. What's been the fallout of that? How has that impacted the way we invest in high streets? How has that changed things like town centre management? So we'll be joined by Pooja Agrawal, who is CEO and co-founder of Public Practice. Amy Taylor, chair of ATCM Wales, will be joining us, and the former CEO of ATCM, Shanaz Carroll, interim head of economic development at Slough, a council that has had its issues with Section 114. And then we'll be having the bid side of that conversation as well, looking at the potential death of what we call additionality, joined by Nick Durston, chair of British Bids, Alex Flint, CEO of Nottingham Bid, a bid that sits under a city council, which again has issued Section 114, and also Danielle at Stirling Bid, who is also with Scotland's Improvement Districts, to give us a Scottish perspective on the challenges of additionality. Finally, it's also for me to ask, is the talk around all of this economic uncertainty also influencing consumer confidence? Is it filtering through to the high street in terms of spend? There have been mixed reports on whether Christmas was good or not. I think most people were hoping for a bumper Christmas across the board because it's been the first quote unquote normal Christmas we've had in years. Unfortunately, I don't think it's turned out quite that way for everyone. So there are mixed reports. Some businesses have said actually they have done really well. The BRC have said that trading failed to meet the expectations that they had. So it will be interesting to find out more from you guys about that. And there is some good news, breaking news today, that the UK economy has grown for the first time in 3 months. It is not a lot. It is 0.1% growth after 2 months of shrinkage, partly boosted by trade for pubs and restaurants, which is good to hear. And also an indicator that in these conversations about economic growth, the high street does matter. It absolutely plays a role. And so we shouldn't be shy in pushing the government in saying, look, if growth is your mission, you need to make sure you're supporting high street and its businesses. So for today's conversation, I want to hear how your local authority, how your bid is being impacted by challenges surrounding funding. I want to know how your high street performed during Christmas. I want to know what your businesses are saying with regards to consumer confidence. What is their sentiment for 2025? Are they concerned about the increase in employers' national insurance in April? Are there other things they are watching out for? And also, what's in your pipeline to support local growth for 2025? So that's it from me. I want to start by handing over to Andrew Goodacre, who is CEO of the British Independent Retailers Association, who do a great job at supporting the small retail sector. So, Andrew, can I bring you in?
Yeah, morning everyone, and thank you very much, OJ, for that. So yes, I'm CEO for Vera, whichever way you want to say it. We've been going many years. I think we celebrated 125 years last year. So we understand independent retailing over that time. We have about 4,500 members across the UK, and we don't do the food. Convenience stores tend to be members of ACS, which is right for them. But we have this wide variety of businesses, from a small pet shop to an independent department store, a hardware shop to a bike shop, everything else in between. So we are that non-food element and retail that exists out there. I'm going to follow AJ's resolution and try not to be too much about doom and gloom. It is challenging out there. There's no doubt. Retail has probably never been more challenging than it is now, especially non-food retail. I think when you break it down, all the sentiment seems to be that that people are still spending on their food, on those essential items, but non-food is the area that has seen the biggest challenge for consumer spend. And that's linked to consumer confidence, we feel. That is a direct correlation, and it's unusual to see it in so stark. It's not unusual to see it when inflation is raging away as it was, but inflation came down again yesterday, so that's 2.5%. But earnings are above inflation. Average earnings about 4.5% at the moment. And normally when earnings are above inflation, people feel and should feel better off. People should feel as if they got a little bit more money in their pocket to spend. But that extra disposable income isn't materializing in sales and on the high street, on retail. Hopefully it will do. Hopefully it will do. Talking to Bank of England, it appears that it's ending up in people's savings accounts. And people are naturally a little bit concerned. And that's understandable, because all the headlines, as OJ has very well put, a lot of our headlines at the moment, whether it's national or local, tend to be on the negative side. And so why should the general public feel confident and feel like spending money, hard-earned money, if there's headwinds that come along for them as well? So it's important that we create a positive narrative. It's important that we focus on those opportunities. It's important that people feel confident enough to go out there and enjoy themselves. So what I would say is why do we still feel room for optimism and positivity on high streets? I just, there's a couple of things. I listened to OJ. It reminded me of areas where I think this government are offering some reassurance and looking ahead. So, despite the growth of online, 74% of items are still bought in shops. So, online is growing. It's 26.5% of our total retail sales, but it still leaves 74% to be bought in on the high street, and that still brings about footfall. Now, footfall figures are down, but I think what we saw in COVID is that it's the intention to spend is the most important thing. And I still think people who are out and about, whilst there's less people out and about, I still think that those who are out and about are there because they want to do something, whether it's have a coffee, whether it's have a beer, whether it's have a bite to eat, whether it's to buy something. So the footfall may be down, but it's not quite as I don't think it's quite the telling stat that it used to be, because it's what people intend to do when they are out and about is most important. But it's still reassuring to know that people are buying in shops more so than buying online. I mentioned average wage growth. I think when I talk, so we engage with DBT as OJ does. We've met the business minister for small businesses, Gareth Thomas, on 2 or 3 occasions now, and spoken with Jonathan Reynolds, the Secretary of State. Clearly, within their business plan, the government's plan, there is revitalising high streets. They want to revitalise high streets. There is a 9-point plan for small businesses in general. Revitalising high streets is in the centre of that. And that is reassuring. And there's clearly an intent that they want to do that. Now, it is about how do they fund it? It is about how do they make it happen? But that gives us the opportunity to hold them to account and say, okay, look, you stated you want to do this. We want to work with you to try to achieve that. And with that in mind, we are part of a retail sector council, and that is chaired by DBT, chaired by Gareth Thomas, and this brings together large and small retail from across the sectors, and we discuss the future of retail from what we need skills wise, what we need investment wise, and we talk about high streets and what high streets need. And similarly, there's a hospitality council as well, and I was talking to the chairperson on that side last week, and we are keen to set up a working group looking at high streets and what we think the government need to do to support high streets. And in many ways, the government have set out a very clear direction, because the white paper on devolution was released a couple of weeks ago. And that clearly talks about their desire to give more power locally. In many ways, they want to create more mayors. I mean, I live in the Midlands, and in West Midlands, where we've had a mayor for a while, Andy Street, and well, previously, and now it's I forget the chap's name, but we've seen the impact mayors can have in Manchester, in Liverpool, in the West Midlands, in London, and I think the desire from this government to use that means of allocating money, allocating funds, and allowing mayors to have more say in where that money's spent and how it's spent, and giving more down to local authorities in that respect, more sort of autonomy in their decision making. I think it's positive, but I think it's important that businesses are part of that conversation as well, small and large. They've got to be part of that conversation. We've got to see them engaging with the stakeholders on the high streets, and that's us, that's retail, that's hospitality, that's the leisure, the culture, the heritage properties people. It's all of those people coming together, and creating and curating the places that people want to be, and people need are out there. So I do think that the devolution work is fundamental to what ATCM does, what you do, and the messages. We need to be aligned. We need to be absolutely clear. I don't think there is one solution for every high street. You know that. You work in those high streets. I think there isn't one solution that will fit everyone, but there has to be a solution for each high street that adds value to it and brings people to it and allows people to enjoy that place in the way we want them to. So I think that's really important, and we've got to work hard that if OJ is right, and I suspect he could well be right, in that the funding made available to high streets does get streamlined and does get tweaked and pushed, that it's not less, but it's more targeted. That wouldn't be no bad thing, in fairness. We want targeted spend. I think the devolution route is the route that they'll probably go down to look to do that and target that spend in there, and it's important that we are part of that debate. In terms of looking ahead as well, I think the changes in the budget, our members of smaller retailers are more fearful of the increase in business rates than the increase in labour costs, and that's partly because that there was a help for small businesses in the budget for national insurance with increase the employees allowance for national insurance, and we've worked out that if you employ 7 or less full-timers, you're probably going to pay less national insurance as an employer than you do now. So that, and from a retail point of view, I think it's something like 9% of retail businesses in the UK employ less than 10 people. So it will help those small retailers. What doesn't help is 140% increase in business rates, and that will hurt. That will hurt. Now, to be honest, and I would never say this to government, we have got evidence of how much it will hurt or doesn't hurt, because in Scotland they did away with the discount 2 or 3 years ago. And in Wales they went to 40% relief last year, and that the world has not collapsed. Let's face it. I'm not saying that we've seen the death of high streets as a result of those actions being taken. I don't think it helps making this move, but it's something that we've seen other retailers deal with and manage around the UK, and I'm sure that those affected in April will make the adjustments. Would it result in inflation? Will people put prices up? I'm not convinced. Certainly at our local, at the independent level, we don't compete on price. Independent retailers very rarely are offer the best value. It's more about the service, more about diversity. It's more about the uniqueness of the product that independent retail would work with. Even large retail would struggle, I think, to increase prices, because if consumer confidence is low, pricing isn't the way, increasing prices isn't the way to increase the spend. So I know there's lots of talk of inflationary actions being taken, but it'd be really interesting to see. I'm not convinced that inflation will rise that much as a result of it. I may be contrary to the sector. I think quite rightly the sector is warning of the possibility. But harsh reality is, if people aren't spending, if retail sales aren't growing, invariably, and what we've seen this last 12 months, one of the big challenges for the independents has been the amount of discount and value-driven offers we've seen in large retail. Black Friday became Black November. It has done for many years. The amount of discounting we saw in the run-up to Christmas was unusually high. And really sort of distorting the market spend in that spend. It still wasn't enough to save Christmas, by all accounts. So and it'll be interesting to see how large retail react. But more like, my fear is that the bigger danger for it would be that you see more job losses, but that would mean more store closures as well, I fear. I think every time now a lease comes up, that business looks closely at it and says, does it stack up? Does that model work for us? And we've already seen how some of these large chains have changed the way their estate is. They don't need that many outlets. And I have a fear that we'll see a lot more, especially in the lower socio-economic areas, a lot more of a challenge around store opening and closures. I think it was reported by the Centre for Retail Research that 13,000 shops closed last year. They expect 17,000 to close this year. Now some of those get repurposed. We know some of those get converted into a different offer. But there is a fear that store closures and business closures would be the bigger impact from the budget actions that we saw. Sorry, my voice is going. That we saw taken in October, coming to effect in April, and that would be where I think the pain really could start to hurt. I find independent retail, resilient, hardworking, creative. They'll do all of that, but they need some of that help along the way. And they need some good luck. We need the economy to pick up. 0.1% growth today. I suspect that will get rechecked, and then it always gets reassessed. And I suspect it'll be back to zero by the time that's been done. But we do need that growth, and the economy needs that growth. It's the only way we can get out of the debt cycle that OJ referred to. It's the only way we can get people feeling good about themselves. There is a industrial strategy. It's focused on 8 areas for growth. Retail's not one of them. Hospitality is not one of them. I'm not entirely surprised, because I think we are not necessarily growing, but we would benefit from growth. Both sectors will benefit massively, because it brings people out and about, and, as I say, increases spend along with it. But I think there's that strategy has got to be brought forward, got to get the impetus behind it. We've seen talk of AI. and the way it's going to be used in local government, I think it'll be used across businesses as we're seeing now. The technology will be the big driver in this area, and I suspect we'll see a government that wants to talk up its ability to invest and get private investment into those areas. And if we can get that confidence building up, if we can get consistent growth, even if it's low growth, then we will see businesses hope and look to carry on and look to fight on. The biggest risk is business owners give up and say, I've had enough, I can't do anymore. And that would be the biggest risk. So we got to give them the hope and belief that it's worth carrying on and making something happen for them, with them, and around them. So it's certainly headwind, but I think there is room to be positive. There's a chance, always the opportunity that the places, and it's important. High streets are really important. You talk to any MP. As they approach an election, high streets are the conversation that happens on their doorstep. They want these high streets to improve. They want to know that they've got a high street in their constituency that they can be proud of, and people are talking positively about. So there is a real positive will to want to do it. I think it's about focusing that effort. It's about focusing that thought, and it's about making sure that the local level, people who understand what's happening at the local level, are fully engaged and fully involved with those conversations. I'm sure you guys do a really good job in making sure that happens out there. We try to do it nationally, and we try to encourage our members to get involved and express it. Some of them are quite shy, and some are very forward in their views, but they care about their place just as much as anyone else, and they want that to happen. So I would like to think there'll be more positives than negatives, but there's a harsh reality that there's going to be some business failure along the way, and that always hurts when you see shops close. It really does. I'm happy to take any questions. I'll try not to, as I say, I'll try not to be too negative, because I think, as always, whilst there's shops, whilst there's high streets, people want to go out and people want to enjoy themselves, and we are part of that experience.
That's a great overview. I've made a lot of notes actually, so I will come back to some of them because I've got plenty of questions myself. So
yeah,
for the group, if you want to ask Andrew a question, we've got him till about 11 o'clock. So hands up or put something in the chat box and I'll bring you in. I'm going to start, Andrew, by asking you. So we might have a tricky situation in a very short term. How much do you think of it? How much do you think it's literally can just boil down to something like confidence? Confidence when it comes to the role of investors, when it comes to the impact of borrowing costs for UK government, impacts how much UK government can invest, confidence in terms of consumers and how confident they feel like when it comes to spending on the high street, especially when you say that what people are earning is now outstripping the rate of inflation. How much of it is just confidence?
You can't underestimate it, whether it's consumer confidence, whether it's business confidence. And I think when people aren't confident, we talk about sport earlier, in all walks of life, if confidence is missing, then we don't get the best out of it. Now, it's unusual. I'm no great economist, but normally when average earnings are outstripping inflation, you would normally see an increase in expenditure coming through, and that is happening. Bank of England will tell you that it's actually a growth in savings that's happening at the moment, and it is that rainy day requirement, people fearful of what might be around the corner, and business confidence is just as important. Businesses. We want growth. We want businesses to invest in growth, and this is this is a valid criticism of that budget in October, was that because of previous promises, the only sector that they could go for to increase income was from business. Now, the problem for high streets is that the businesses that are situated in high streets our employers. The retail sector employs 10% of the UK population. It's huge. Hospitality must be 10% as well. And so when you go to business and say we're going to now increase your cost of employment um, in this way, that's massive. That does change their ability to invest. That does change, and that's why I fear that it's more likely to force them down the line of really revisiting their their property mix and saying, well, yeah, that doesn't make sense in that area. We can't do it. So confidence is massive. We need it, but you get confidence from knowing what's coming and knowing that you can plan ahead. And we all expect a wage rise, absolutely. National living wage going up 6.7% wasn't a massive surprise, I don't think. But it's when you add in the national insurance contributions on top of that for large employers, that is millions of pounds now that may have gone on investment that just isn't going to happen in 25, 26. And that would be that is a criticism of that budget, because the budget was not a growth budget. No matter how it was presented, it was not about growth, not from retail and hospitality. Other sectors may make up some of that shortfall, but not from the bit. But those are the businesses that sit on the high streets that you need on high streets to be thriving and investing to improve what they offer on the high street. And I think it's going to be hard for those businesses to invest.
Yeah, I think both sort of really good comments, and I think you're so right around the importance of confidence, and I can absolutely understand that for a lot of consumers, given what we've just been through in terms of the steep rises in inflation a couple of years ago, if they're now earning more than the rate of inflation, I can understand why many households would just want to save for the next rainy day. Or indeed, maybe they're still playing catch up because their household has been knocked by
Yeah, I think
years.
I think also what's interesting, I should have said to people actually as well. One of the other, so as well as CEO for Bio, I'm also a low pay commissioner. I've been on the low pay commission for 12 months. So I'm one of those people who determine what the national living wage will go up to in April. Now, what's interesting about that is that I get the chance in that role to speak to employers and employees around the UK and across lots and lots of sectors, all the sectors we have: manufacturers, suppliers, producers, deliverers, low paid, private sector, public sector, care sectors, and so on. And one of the things that comes out is that even though the national living wage has gone up now in the last 3 years, 26%, it's significant. It's gone up. Ask those people, do they feel better off? The answer is no, they don't. And ask them why they don't feel better off. It's because there's these other costs, like car insurance have gone up. And if you've got a car and you insured your car recently, that's gone up 25% in the last 2 or 3 years. House insurance goes up, holiday insurance. It's those, and I'm not blaming the insurance industry. It's just it's other costs have risen just as much, and that's where inflation comes. But there's a sense of, even if your wages have gone up, other things are going up around you. That overall inflation may be flat, but there's one or two elements that you've got to have. If you've got a car, you've got to have it insured. If you've got a house, you've got to have it insured. There's certain things that are just eating away at people's ability to spend, even though they're earning 25% more than they were 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah,
And
the big
I think there's a responsibility here to get things sorted out and to get the whole economy working harder together to allow people to feel more confident in their personal wealth and in their ability to spend themselves and invest in their own enjoyment and pleasure. But it doesn't feel as if we can solve all those problems just by one pay rise. We never would do. But it's interesting that people don't feel better off.
that is, and I guess the big one, as you're mentioning those additional factors where there will be a legacy, sort of a shadow hanging over a lot of households. The big one's probably mortgages. isn't
Yeah,
it? The
yeah, it
massive
is. It
increase
is.
in mortgages.
I mean, it's interesting about the winter fuel payments for this pension. This population of pensioners have been wealthier in many ways. You know, they're kind of a golden era pensioners with the private pensions coming through and the property rises, the property value prices that we've seen increase. And so I'm not saying that's everyone, but in general, you know, pensioner poverty is something that we don't see as much of. And yet they don't feel better off because the winter fuel payment has been taken away, and it's all those negative elements that sort of feed in and make people feel insecure.
Yeah, yeah. Mark, you've been waiting patiently
Yeah,
for
sorry,
Rick
Mark.
Wynn. And Mark, do you want to just say where you're from as well for Andrew's benefit?
Hi, Andrew, Leeds City Council. I work
Hello,
in
Mark.
city centre management in Leeds. So I suppose my question is more based upon the kind of more localised place management stuff that many of us deal with. And
Yeah,
said there's not one solution for every town centre, and that's obviously the case. But I wonder what your members are saying in terms of headline asks for day-to-day place management stuff from that sector, from I suppose both local authorities and bids. What are they asking?
yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, Leeds, I like. My daughter went to university in Leeds and loved it, and it's a great place to visit. So you're doing some good stuff in Leeds in many ways. So there's two or three areas that we hear more of. Now, I think people want to see activities in their towns, and I think bids are very good at creating activities and bringing people in, whether it's through markets and as a. But I think what we're hearing is it's almost a bit like, yeah, the Christmas markets when they first started were great, but actually they feel a bit tired now and a bit same. They're not really changed over the years, and it's the same kind of offering. I think if we can bring in more diversity and a bit more quality and points of difference, that's what people are wanting there. The other issue is that people want the high streets to feel safe. Actually, that's partly due to rising retail crime that many retailers have experienced. And it's about you know, is there sufficient police presence in that area? I know it's not what you're responsible for, but it helps. Are we on top of the antisocial behaviour element that are coming through? Are there too many people sleeping rough? Are there too many people begging on the streets? Are there too many people just being a nuisance on the streets? So we hear comments about people saying that their high street doesn't feel as welcoming or as safe as it should do. And I think that's something that is noticeable, that's coming through. And I think it is linked with the fact that we've seen this awful sort of increase in the amount of stock stolen from shops, but also the behaviour towards staff who work in shops is so much more negative as well. So I think if we can create that safe place for people to visit, if we can create the positive messages that you see in a place that you want to see there as well. Kate, you know, it's a bit like a home, isn't it? If your high street is clean, neat, tidy, it looks well kept, and then people can wander around safely and know that they're not going to be hassled and not going to be witness to negative events, whether it's sort of drug dealing or crime or people falling out and so on. Then I think creating that positive feel when you go onto the high street is really important. But it feels that safety and the sense of it is what our members often talk about at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And the only thing I'll say in response is that safety point chimes with the surveying we do of both businesses and people that visit or don't visit Leeds city centre. So it's becoming the number one thing, I think, safety.
It's linked with this increase in theft, no doubt about it. But a lot of our members say it's about having more police on the streets. I don't think it is just about that. I think that's too simple and too simplistic. But when we look at designing places and improving places, we should always think about creating safe environments for people and where people, you know, the lights that we use in winter, is it lit well enough? Does it feel, you know, good in that respect? So it doesn't surprise me because we're hearing it and it feels like it should be a relatively simple thing to solve in some ways. a quick win. Although I appreciate there is no such thing as a quick win when it comes to sort of long-term planning on high streets.
And it's not just designing spaces, it's maintaining them to that standard as well, of course, which is
Yeah, it is. No, and
that
that takes funding, and it takes money to do so. But actually, I'm critical of some of our members and businesses in general. I used to work in hospitality as well as retail over the years. I mean, they have to take responsibility for what their premise looks like as well, and what their business looks like, and they have to maintain their shop fronts. You know, the shop front is your shop window, isn't it? But it's not just what you have displayed in there. The whole business should look well presented. And I despair when I see some shops have got weeds growing up in front of it, and you think, well, you know, as the business owner, would you not want to just pull them up? So yeah, in front of your shop premises. If your neighbour does that as well, if your neighbour does that, then actually you then get a far better presented street in that respect. So I think there is some responsibility for business to take. Yeah, it's easy to say, well, that's what I pay my rates for, but actually, you know, you should. Yeah, I would always encourage businesses to take responsibility for what's immediately in front of their premises, not just what's inside it.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, really good. And I've got another question for you, Andrew, as well. So you brought up the really interesting point that food is probably doing better than the high street than non-food.
Yeah.
And if it feels like there's a bit of a sort of stagnation in terms of the growth of non-food. And what we had, not this Christmas, but last Christmas, when we were reflecting on Christmas trade, some members who said that there were people who were going out in the final quarter of the year as per normal, but those trips onto the high street weren't led by a need to do shopping for present. They were actually led by the need for a social experience. So people were going to Christmas markets or pubs or restaurants with colleagues to have a drink, have some food, and maybe they'd do a little bit of shopping while they were in town, but that wasn't the primary purpose of the trip. And it feels like that one of the questions I was always going to have for this Christmas is that a trend that seems to be repeating itself? Are we at a stage where the food and beverage is a big draw, but there's more we need to do to support non-food on the high street?
I think the hospitality side has become the mainstay of the high street, and that's been true enough over recent years. You know, I think it's retail is no longer the dominant factor in terms of number of businesses or even the reason for visiting. But if you don't have, and this is why I you know, it makes sense if you've got two councils of stakeholders, hospitality and retail, asking themselves what should we do to improve our high streets, then those two councils have to actually work together because the stakeholders are in there. They have to be together to do that. And I think they're interdependent businesses. I think if our high street was full of cafes and bars and restaurants, it would be good, but it would benefit from having some retail in there as well. Now, I think there'll be less shops. I mean, there's a natural change of order on why high streets exist and why people visit, and that would lead to less need for retail. I think most experts in the retail sector would say there's too much property dedicated to retail still within there. So we fully accept that all the shrinkage we're seeing in shops is not entirely due to government policy or lack of spending. I think there is a change of consumer behavior, as you pointed out, that people want to use the high street for something totally different, and shopping is important, but it's not the main reason anymore. What retailers, I think, need help with is how to redefine their business so that they can align themselves to those needs. And so how does a retail business integrate some hospitality into what it's doing? You know, how does a retail business create servicing into what it's doing within there as well? And I think that's where they need help, is how do they change their business so they can actually benefit from some of this more stronger experience-led visits to high streets. We're seeing some changes, I think, from a sustainability point of view, and and we're seeing a stronger circular economy come through, and that's about people visiting and getting things repaired instead of buying new. And maybe if we can continue that chain and bring in more service-led retailing, that will build on the fact that people are visiting high streets for different reasons and want to take something different from it.
Yeah, all really good points. And, I have talked about this this need for a lot of high streets to think about the sort of term of de-anchoring and re-anchoring. So for a long time, high street has been anchored by retail, and then you'll have other uses which have almost benefited from your anchor retail tenant.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
we're now
I mean,
at the stage where it needs a different anchor, and maybe
yeah,
retail can then
yeah.
piggyback on the success of others.
Yeah, it does, but it needs a different mindset from retailers. And it's not hard. It is hard to effect that change sometimes, because it's a different approach needed from retail. The other point I would make, and I should have said this earlier about footfall, and I think this is something that town centre developers need to take into account. There's 3 locations where footfall is measured. AJ, well, you probably all know this. So you talk about shopping centre footfall, we talk about high street footfall, we talk about retail park footfall. The one location that is not suffering a loss of footfall is retail parks. And I think it's level with, and it's actually about at pre-COVID levels. In terms of occupancy of site, the average vacancy rate we have is 14% still, I think, the last figure I saw. It's fairly, but that's driven by shopping centres and high streets. Vacancy rate on retail parks is very low, very low. It's not very often you see an empty unit on a retail park. I think there's something we should look at retail parks and ask ourselves, why are they doing better? Is it just about the big sheds, the big brands they have? Is it because they feel safe? Is it because it's not massive amount of hospitality in there. There is some, you may find a McDonald's on a retail park. You may find a Costa, drive-through Costa, something like that. There's often a supermarket there that helps, but it's about accessibility for me. It's free to go there. You're free to park there. It's convenient to use the place. And I think when we look at our town centres and we want to bring people into it, we've got to make them more accessible. That's one thing I really should have stressed earlier. Accessibility is so crucial, and it does come down to about how do you allow people to park there and make use of that space, and how do you encourage people to come in, and how do you make the infrastructure work so that people can access it in many different ways. If we can solve that, and we should look at the retail parks and say, well, there's reasons people are using them, and those reasons can apply to town centres, but we put up too many barriers to prevent that.
Yeah, agreed. And certainly what you've said in terms of some of what the data is showing around retail parks vacancies tallies with everything we get told by data providers we work with as well. So that absolutely makes sense. I know it's 2 minutes to 11, so I'm going to let you go. I don't want you to be late for your next appointment. That was
I just want to leave and say, look, I've got a lot of time for bids. I've got a lot of time for town centre managers and people who really care about the places where you work. And I just really want to say thanks, because it's not always clear from our members. Some of them are anti-bid. Some of them are very easily quick to criticise. But just keep up the good work, guys. I honestly think it makes so much difference to the chances for people to succeed. We have one aim in all the work we do, in all the services we provide. We only want one aim, to achieve one thing, and that's to help retailers to succeed. And I think you are part of that. So please keep up the good work, and anything you need from us through OJ, or contact us direct, and we'll do what we can to help you. But I just want to say thank you for the time and effort you put in, because it's not always appreciated, I don't think, by those who get the benefit from it.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's much appreciated. I know members will be very happy with that. That's a great start to the new year. Thank you very much for that, Andrew. And I know we'll catch up very soon.
Yeah, I'm coming to your conference in February as well.
Fab. Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. I look forward to seeing you there.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Fantastic. See you, Andrew. So guys, yeah, I'd like to open to the floor to hear from you about Christmas performance, about how you're feeling regarding the year to come, some of the big things you've got in the pipeline. Andrew's absolutely right when he talks about the reorganisation of local government. It's likely to mean more mayors, different decision making. There will be the streamlining of high street funds. Doesn't necessarily mean less money. It could be the same amount of money, just split up amongst fewer funds, but could well mean that more of it is distributed by local leaders, such as new mayors coming in. So there are changes there. We talked about business rates and employers' national insurance. What have you heard from businesses about those? And it's really important to pick out the differential impact on different businesses as well, which Andrew alluded to. Employers' national insurance will apply UK wide. Changes to business rates from the UK government only apply to England. So those reforms, which mean small businesses will pay less, but bigger businesses will have to make up the difference, that's going to apply to England only. So there are going to be winners and losers in all of this. So it'd be good to hear from you guys what you're feeling as well. So I want to open it up to the floor. Does anybody want to be the first to give us an idea, at least on Christmas performance? Neil, can I bring you in?
Yeah, thank you, OJ. I'll be the first one to break cover. As I say, we've seen a mixed picture in Bexley. As I say, just looking at our major town centre, obviously we saw the footfall figures and 3.3% down in shopping centres, etc. The platform that we use, I have to wait for the pipeline to come in, and as I say, it's just come in. Now we're looking at 6.4% up in our shopping centre. We're looking at 11.9% up in our town centre as a whole. Yes, we are missing that spend picture, and as I say, that's why it was interesting to hear off Andrew. And also about the national insurance change, obviously, so 7 or less, they'll actually end up paying less, which is good news to know, because as we've all alluded to, confidence is the key. And that confidence, I know, OJ, you're normally bare doom and gloom and stuff like that, but we're hearing that from multiple sources. It's all on the news. As I say, I definitely think that's affected business confidence, and as I say, the lag on consumer confidence as well. And that's my job within economic development to say, hang on, it's actually not that bad. But what I am concerned though, and what is very concerning, is we've done some very rough, quick calculations with our collector of business rates, and we're looking at 150% increase on average. And I've just done a quick further on a location. So for our major town centre, those businesses in there are going to be paying 150% more business rates than they do currently. So as I say, it's just, are we talking ourselves? Do we continue to talk ourselves into a recession? As I say, it's interesting to know that Scotland already done that, got no relief there. Wales have gone down to 40%. Those businesses in Scotland and Wales, we haven't heard they've collapsed, they've coped. So it's interesting, be interesting to hear from other local authorities about, personally for a town centre's point of view, that business rates scares me the most. Yeah, the larger retailers that have got the national insurance bills, they've got it. But as I say, independents are key to maintaining a healthy high street, in my opinion, that difference of offer, making them not the same. So it'd be interesting to hear from other local authorities. But as I say, footfall, it's been positive. Yeah, activity generally positive, yes. And that's in our major town centre and in our other town centres. So it'd be great to hear what other people are seeing as well.
Yeah, be more than welcome to bring others in. So yeah, so to clarify for England, the way it's going to work is at the moment, retail, hospitality and leisure sectors below a certain threshold, businesses are getting 70% relief on their business rates. As of April, that's going to go down to 40% relief on business rates. For some, that's going to be a big increase in costs. And then it's the April after where we'll expect to see the reorganisation. So there will be new rates coming in for those retail, hospitality and leisure businesses under 50k rateable value. and then a higher rate for those between 50k and 500,000, and then a higher rate still for the over 500,000 in terms of their rateable value. But that's not till April 2026. For now, we're just looking at that discount going from 70% to 40%. So there is going to be a big increase there. It is one of the things that's going to impact business sentiment, absolutely. So happy to hear from people on if businesses are talking about those concerns. Is it crime, antisocial behaviour, something Andrew brought up? Is that something that's a challenge? We've talked previously around the issue of e-bikes. Is that becoming a challenge on the high street? So open forum. Tell me, guys, what is it that's irking you in your town centre? What's positive? Happy to bring anybody in. Nikki Butler, do you want to come in and give us a little information about? I can't think of anybody better to give us an overview of what Christmas looked like for many areas, what the feeling is in terms of what the data's saying.
Thanks, OJ. Yeah. So, I mean, December was not great. We do monthly spend analysis. And so from our point of view, November went really well. So we saw the increases in there. We saw really strong Black Friday performance on the high street. Hopefully lots of other people kind of felt that too. And then I think everybody was, oh, super, the momentum's with us. Hopefully that'll continue into December. And, our data played out -7% sales, -7% customers, and ATV held up slightly more, which I think is very much akin to what Andrew was saying, which was the people who did go out seemed to be spending more. So, we certainly weren't seeing it sort of equivalently, that everything was down, so there were some people definitely still there. I think certainly from our clients' perspective, we had a lot of people who had a lot of events cancelled. There was clearly a big weather impact into December. You were either really lucky and it all you picked the right weekend and it all went really well, or, not. And that's just kind of a bit luck of the gods. We can't do an awful lot about that. But I think we certainly felt like that came through in the high street performance. In terms of overall kind of year to date, that did sort of drag us down into a kind of generally pretty negative position. Certainly, again, echoing what OJ and Andrew were saying in terms of the it's not all equal. So, we definitely saw food and drink and sort of grocery, that sort of spend holding up more. Fashion continues to be a real challenge, and that played out in year-to-date figures. And I think what we absolutely would concur with again would be, the consumer confidence is the key. So it's not a case that consumers in November and December had less money in their pocket. Every indicator would say that that was not the case. And so that really kind of, I think what happened was everybody kind of obviously went out in November, got their Black Friday bargain, and then maybe if they'd been feeling more confident, they might have gone back out again in December and picked up a few more bits, whereas everyone was like, right, no, picked up my 40%, 50% off prezzies, that's it, I'm still going to spend on my Christmas dinner and I'll still go out and spend, on those sorts of things. But, we're kind of reining it in slightly. And certainly, I know Diane's put a couple of times in our webinars, the ONS savings rate is very much, echoing the sentiment that Andrew was saying. That spare money is not coming out, unfortunately, at the moment on the high street. That spare money is being squirreled away because people are feeling, not particularly confident. I think in terms of what was kind of positive is, as we exactly said, food and drink did much better comparatively. Health and beauty kind of finished the year with kind of ATV holding up really well. So that point around, sort of the sales were flat, but actually, your customers were down a bit, but actually the people who were going out and spending in those experiential categories are willing to spend more. think we've got a webinar coming up where we're kind of going to delve into this in a couple of weeks. Hopefully we'll see some people here. It's in the ATCM link, but one of the things we're going to try and do is unpick this category performance so we can help understand, what do we have to do to set up for success in 2025. But certainly, there is a theme coming out from what we've looked at so far that, those who are in the town and city centres are spending well and sort of holding those numbers up. And hopefully that will, come through, and when that consumer confidence hopefully turns a corner, everybody's sitting there, the money's there, the kind of, town and city centres are there, everyone's ready and raring, and we just sort of keep our fingers and toes crossed that tide of confidence can be turned, and because that's really what it needs to unlock.
That's really useful, really, really useful. I want to bring in, are there any bids on the call that would like to have their say? Actually, it'd be good to hear from a bid. I'm looking, we got Watford, Exeter. If anybody wants to jump in, please, bids, it'll be good to hear from you. I also want to hear actually from County Council Audrey. I don't know if you'd like to come in, because it'll be good to hear from you in terms of how things are going in Warwickshire in general. And also, has there been any discussion around local government reorganisation, what it means for like a county council? Because at the moment, I think a lot of us are trying to figure out how this issue matters to ATCM members.
So yeah, at county council level, it's a really, really, it's a very confusing picture. We're all trying to make sense of it. It's happened very quickly at county level for us. So we're waiting for Warwickshire County Council, we're waiting for sort of more news towards the end of the month as to whether we're going to be one of the first authorities that goes forward or not, sort of moving from it towards a single tier. It's a bit confusing. It's quite a fragmented picture in terms of funding, because a lot of the businesses, as you guys have all been saying, are affected, particularly going to be affected around the business rate. So there's a lot of worry around that. And that's probably the top comment that we've had from businesses that we've come across over the past few weeks, even that the one thing this year they're worrying about is the business rates. But on the positive side, they are asking, what can we do about it? What other support programs are there? And they're more receptive to looking for alternative ways to sort of flex the businesses and move other ways forward. And they are moving towards looking at the experiences. So we're finding it easier to link them into business support and sort of push them that way, although it is quite difficult because of the changing picture and the unitary and the devolution. So everything, it feels like we're in such a state of flux at the moment, and it's only as the government starts working through and as all the politics starts settling down that we can kind of get a clearer picture for people. At the moment, we're sort of trying to do business as usual and keep pushing businesses towards business support, keep supporting all the individual high streets and the bids in our area. But yeah, we'd really welcome just a more settled picture and sort of less fragmented, because it's difficult to deal with the fragmentation and how people work together if the government's changing the way we work together. So we kind of need that to come first before we can kind of move in the other direction. And the other thing that I think Nikki was talking about is the weather over Christmas. So that definitely affected. It was hit and miss of which place, which market was going to be on, which wasn't. But it absolutely resonates with how that's affected people coming out, and everybody's been pushing towards the experience, using social media to get people to come and experience the places in the towns. So it kind of makes sense that people are sort of moving towards the hospitality side with that, and getting all the shopping out of the way earlier in November. So it really resonates what you're saying, Nikki, to kind of what we've seen across Warwickshire as well. It's been very similar.
That's really useful update, Audrey. Really useful. Nicola, can I bring you in? So it'll be good to hear about South West and what's happening in Exeter.
Yeah, of course. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Thank you for the opportunity. Really have enjoyed the webinar this morning. Certainly all the things that I've been hearing are really chiming with our experience in the city centre. We definitely found that footfall was impacted by the weather, and that spend in the city was quite subdued in what would have been the golden quarter was really a challenging time for a lot of our businesses. Certainly looking, you know, on the horizon about the implementation of those changes in the Chancellor's budget is of serious concern for a lot of our businesses. Fortunately, about 40% of the businesses in our business improvement district are independent, so they're small family-run and managed businesses with very small numbers of employees. So we're hoping that for those guys in particular, there, you know, it could be that there's a slight improvement in their sort of spend on sort of staffing. Definitely for us coming back after Christmas, the biggest concern that we've got at the moment is around sort of shop theft, unauthorised encampments across the city, and continuing ASB. So these have been issues that have been kind of really at the forefront of the work that we've been doing over the course of the last 12 to 18 months, and we've implemented a number of measures to try to address it. But for whatever reason, over the Christmas period, it seems to have massively exacerbated, and we're dealing at the moment with a number of very problematic encampments that you know, there's evidence of criminality and lots of kind of complexity around land ownership and how to kind of really get them moved on. So working really closely with the local policing team, with the City Council and the County Council, and with our businesses as well, to start to put in place a bit of a pro forma around, you know, the way that we address this together, and a kind of process map around what effectively can be done, because it's really been particularly this week the number one issue that we've been dealing with in the office.
That's really useful as a summary. I think what I'm going to do is we will draw things to a close there. Really good meeting. I think so many important topics have been touched upon. I think Andrew's overview in terms of the small retail sector has been really useful, and thanks a lot, guys, for chipping in with comments as well. I think it's just good to get that overview for the start of the year. So we are working on our events program for the year. We're going to try and have as many in-person roundtables as possible. So we're going to try and aim for 2 roundtables for every network this year. We're getting back up to speed following the pandemic, so we're hoping most Tuesdays during the year we'll have a roundtable somewhere in the country. So it'd be good to see you all in person. But the first big event next up, a crisis in local government finance, how that impacts our local authority members, how that impacts our bid members, and what we can do about it. So do get signed up for that. I think tickets for that are under £100 per person for the day in London, so hopefully not too difficult to get to. So guys, thank you very much. I hope to see you all soon. Have a good rest of the day. See you guys.